I'm a put me in coach kind of a guy, and I said, just put me in where you want. Oh, okay, you guys, you can do the incest. So here we go with the yuck factor. I'm going to lay out a little bit of what most of these talks have been tasked with doing. We're going to lay out what the verses are that we've been tasked with expositing. What are the reasons for it? What are the Old Testament applications for it? And what are we supposed to do with it today? So I'm going to try to hit all that. This is going to be a fire hose of stuff to try to get across in 15 minutes. The information, it was not nearly as straightforward as I thought it was going to be. So here we go. Here are the death penalty passages that I was given from Leviticus 20, Numbers 11, 12, 14, and 17. If there's a man who lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood guiltiness is upon them. If there's a man who lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed incest. Their blood guiltiness is upon them. Verse 14, if there's a man who marries a woman and her mother, it is immorality. Both he and they shall be burned with fire, so that there will be no immorality in your midst. Number 17, if there's a man who takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, so that he sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace. They shall be cut off in the sight of the sons of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness. He bears his guilt. So there are the penalty passages. If you've ever heard me speak, I go on bunny trails. So here's the first quick bunny trail is uncovered his father's nakedness is an Old Testament euphemism for sexual relations. In this case that we've been looking at, we're talking about relations with the father's wife or the father's daughter, the uncovering of the nakedness. So the nakedness of the wife is the nakedness of the husband. The marital union makes us one flesh. So uncovering the father's nakedness is having sexual relations with the mother. And there's a whole bunny trail that we could go down. We're not going to go down about Noah and Ham. Did he just see his father's nakedness? And we just saw that in one of the verses. The brother or sister, they saw the nakedness. Or did he uncover his father's nakedness? We're not going to go down that trail right now. But we are just going to be satisfied knowing that the Leviticus passages, uncovered nakedness, is an incestuous relationship. Now, there's broader context here. Leviticus 18 and Deuteronomy 27 really lay out what are the incestuous relationships. And here's the list. Mother, and this list is from the man's standpoint. The mother, the father's wife, the sister, the half-sister, the son's daughter, the daughter's daughter, stepsister, father's sister, mother's sister, father's brother's wife, daughter-in-law, brother's wife, wife's mother. And then there are joint marriages that are forbidden. Joint marriages of a woman and her daughter, a woman and her son's or daughter's daughter, a woman and her sister, while the former is still alive, a woman and her mother. So we're going to get back to, we'll see this list again, but there it is. Those are the incestuous relationships that are described in the Bible from the man's point of view. Out of the gate, let's dispense with one of the anti-Christian, anti-Bible arguments. Who was Cain's wife? Wouldn't that have been incest? Clearly, the creationists are wrong and the evolutionists are right. It's a non-starter because even if you granted the idea of evolution, it means that in order to avoid the incest that from the slime, a man and a woman would have had to arise at the same time in the evolutionary scheme that weren't somehow related to each other. It's the same problem. You'd have to have all these families arising within a generation for the evolutionist argument to be right. So it's just a non-argument. This kind of gotcha is as often the case, it's not a gotcha at all. And so we don't want to, we don't need to deal with that. Clicker not working. So the usual argument is this, that as mankind proliferated, the effects of sin on our genetics causes mutations, and that the incest laws were given to prevent us from genetic abnormalities. Prior to the giving of the law, the genetic material was pure enough that we didn't have to worry about it. Cain clearly had to marry one of his sisters. And that was not a problem in the early stages. But we have very little biblical or historical evidence to indicate that people understood genetic abnormalities in ancient times. We just don't have it. What we do know is that God commanded what was right and wrong. We know that. We trust the Bible. The Bible is God's word. He commanded what's right and wrong. He's not looking for scientific advice from us. We know now that circumcision on the 8th day is perfect because K2, the clotting factor in an infant's blood, only comes about on day 8. And so the circumcision laws were perfectly aligned with biological facts. But it's not like the Hebrews experimented to figure out what's the best day to do. No, God didn't need their experimentation. Neither did he need our understanding of genetic mutations to give the law when he gave it. So his timing was perfect. Why were the laws given? Here's the reasons that were given in the Bible. Leviticus 18:3, you shall not do what is done in the land of Egypt where you lived, nor are you to do what is done in the land of Canaan where I'm bringing you. You shall not walk in their statutes. And then it's reiterated in verse 24 of Leviticus 18, do not defile yourself by any of these things, for by these, all these, the nations which I'm casting out before you have become defiled. Included in the Leviticus 18 were the incest laws. And so God is giving his reasons. I don't want you to do it. The nations before you did that, and included in the host of reasons that you're going to hear a bunch about today, is incest. So the reason that God gave the laws and when he gave the laws were his own purpose, and because he sees them as wrong. He determined the proper time in history to implement the laws about incest. And Lot's daughters, we have to consider Lot's daughters. The daughters, talk about yuck factor. This is an ugly story, after Sodom was destroyed, and the daughters are in the cave with Lot. They get him drunk, and they become impregnated by their father. It was not incest because the laws, it was incest as we define it now, but it wasn't against God's law. The law had not yet been given. Consider, too, that Lot's daughters, having seen fire and brimstone fall from the sky, think it's the end of the world. They may be the last people on earth. They're worried about progeny. So it's an ugly story, it's yucky, but it did not violate God's law. So we have to keep that in mind. If murder was understood, or should have been, by Cain, why not incest? Is that a valid question? Well, God clearly expected that Cain would know that murder was wrong, but it's from the creation account. Man was made in God's image. You're attacking God's image when you destroy a man. In the same way, men and women are married before the fall happens. So in the creation account, we have the understanding that homosexuality would be wrong. Well, it wouldn't even be possible. I mean, you've got a man and a woman. This is what God intended. But monogamous marriage is also intended. That's all. These are things that we could derive from the creation account. Adultery, homosexuality, or an attack on what God had created. So these are things that could be understood from the creation account. Maybe not incest. There doesn't seem to be any prohibition against incest in the creation order. And we have to rest on the idea that incest is wrong. God said it was wrong, and because of the timing of it, it was wrong when he said it was wrong. You might make a case that God created the animals and multiple families of animals, and you don't necessarily see incestuous relationships in the animal kingdom, but that's an argument for another time. Moving on to a different topic. Cut off versus kill. This is something that's bothered me for a long time. What do we do with cut off? Because there are a lot of penalty verses that we're going to see today. We've seen them already in the Leviticus or in the incest accounts about somebody being cut off. What does cut off mean, and when does it mean kill? There are categories of cut off that are clearly not talking about killing somebody. There's some ambiguous ones, and then there are some that are very clearly killing. In the category of clearly not killed, we have in 2 Chronicles, King Uzziah was a leper until the day of his death. He dwelt in an isolated house because he was a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. He wasn't killed, he was cut off. It was kind of like an excommunication. Zechariah, for indeed I will raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for those who are cut off. Well, you know, the implication's clear there. They're still there, but he's not going to care for them. These are categories where killing is not in view. In a category of possibly killed, Genesis 17:14, and the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Now, Zipporah, she circumcised her son because Moses was threatened of being killed for not having done that. So is this, maybe the cutoff here is killed, maybe it's not. It's kind of ambiguous. In possibly killed category, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. This from Exodus. On the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. Whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. Cut off. And then in Numbers, but the man who is clean and not on a journey and ceases to keep the Passover, that same person shall be cut off from among his people, because he did not bring the offering of the Lord at the appointed time. That man shall bear his sin. We see that formula elsewhere, bearing the sin, being cut off. So, possibly killed. But in the category of definitely killed, here are just two examples. Genesis 9:11, this is my covenant with you, never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Clearly people were killed there. Exodus 21:14, you shall keep the Sabbath, therefore it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work, that person shall be cut off. Well, we know, obviously, that it should be put to death, be cut off. And we saw an example of that in Numbers when the guy was picking up sticks. Why does this matter? Because of Leviticus 18:19, we are looking at, after all the incest definitions, the prohibition of bestiality, adultery, etc., God concludes with this. He says, for whoever commits any of these abominations, the persons who commit them shall be cut off from among their people. So he's laying out all these other abominations, and he concludes with, the people shall be cut off. Well, clearly, most of those things are death penalty. So I thought, well, great, because clearly God is lumping incest with all these things. Why are the Leviticus penalties so limited? Back to the rule, to the list. Forbidden by the incest. Looking at that list, there's something amiss here, right? The daughter's daughter is included in that list, but the daughter isn't. Not the daughter. Well, by implication, the daughter is going to be part of that incest list. And so the interpretive question is, if we can assume that the daughter is included there, isn't it reasonable to expect that the Bible, is it reasonable to believe that the Father allows that? It's not. It's not. And so if we can make that assumption, what do we do with the cutoff in Leviticus 18:29? Can we assume that everybody in the incest list is being cut off, is being put to death? Are the penalties for everybody? And I would have concluded yes, except that in Leviticus 20, 19 and 21, the incestuous relationships with aunts and sisters-in-law are punished with childlessness and bearing their guilt. So there's a lot of these things that are being put to death, and cut off almost always means being put to death. But here, there's carved out this little bit of no. So we seem to have some degrees of separation that we're dealing with. And at one time, the church condemned 30 different familial relationships as incest. The 1500s, that got cut back to 11. And we don't have time to get into all of that. But it seems to be that there's a degree of separation issue. So what do we do with this today? Well, it seems clear that God's law regarding incest, it's not ceremonial. It's not something that Christ's death did away with. Should civil authorities impose capital punishment on incest? And if so, which degrees? Of course, secular society doesn't allow for a death penalty at all, so we can dismiss that. The problem in 1 Corinthians that Paul dealt with was one of the killing. But he didn't call for death, he called for excommunication. But it's a civil sphere thing to do the death penalty. So that's why Paul didn't call for the death, because he was dealing with the church. How would we justify a death penalty for incest? It's an attack on the family. Just like adultery, abortion, homosexuality, it's an attack on the family. These are all abominations. Not every abomination is a death penalty abomination, like different weights and measures are an abomination. But today, as opposed to back when God gave these laws, the genetic problems are real. It's a good idea to avoid the incest and to uphold the cohesiveness, the internal respect and fitness of the family. It's so important that incest laws, complete with a range of punishments depending on the degree, including up to death, these are completely warranted. The sanctity of the family is of paramount importance in Christianity and for the world. Thanks for your time.